My favorite part of it is that like I was so in and so engaged the entire time, but I wasn't like wondering what are the deeper themes, what's the symbolism. It was just a fantastic story. I think that you should really be using the characters and their interactions to show those themes. This shows such interesting growth for this character that he's just willing to abandon this part of himself that wants to orchestrate everything and wants to have everything make sense. I've gotten into some really cool conversations with people about what they've taken from it and what they think is going on with Lionel. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Backer and welcome to Off the Wall Novels. I just wanted to do a year in review because this was a very huge year for me, even though it felt very boring and I spent a lot of time alone. So looking back, it almost feels like I didn't do anything, where I actually probably did more this year than any other year in my life. So one of the biggest things that happened to me was that I moved to New York, and I didn't really plan on doing this even 6 or 7 months before moving, because I actually applied to a bunch of MFA programs expecting to get into at least one, and I didn't get into any of them. And so it was a pretty big pivot for me. I ended up saving up my money from substitute teaching and packed it all in a U-Haul and moved to Brooklyn, and I've been here since August. And I've been substitute teaching here at an all-girls charter school. I think it's given me a surprising amount of opportunities to talk about storytelling and writing. I've gotten to engage them, I think, on a much more accessible level. So when interpreting stories like Disney movies, there seems to be something actually harder about writing a very accessible, emotionally engaging story, and that, I think, reflects a broader shift in my interests toward filmmaking and towards stuff that isn't as much of like a chin stroker. And a lot of the films that I saw this year too seem to be like screaming that information at me. So like for one, The Green Knight, which was one of my favorite films of the year, it seemed that the central theme of this was somebody who is stuck in their head and is very ego-driven. And so I took the moral of that film, without giving away too much, to be that you need to let go of that and not be so in your head and so isolated, and to allow yourself to be more vulnerable. Another favorite film of the year for me was Zola. I thought this was just such an awesome movie. It was so much fun, and I don't think that that's a film you really have to interpret. It's just about a wild night that this stripper ends up having when she gets taken down to Florida with the expectation that she'll be dancing, and it turns out that it's actually like prostitution. My favorite part of it is that like I was so in and so engaged the entire time, but I wasn't like wondering what are the deeper themes, what's the symbolism. It was just a fantastic story that really kept my attention the entire time. Another one in this vein is Licorice Pizza. I already made a video about this, but it just seemed so cool and refreshing to see Paul Thomas Anderson, who has so much symbolism in his work and so much interpretation, to kind of put all of that to the side. I think that there's a lot of subtext that you can read in Licorice Pizza, but I wouldn't say that there's a lot of symbolism. He just really trusted himself to let these well-defined characters lead the plot, and he's actually mentioned this in interviews before, that he doesn't try to inject theme, he just tries to let the character make decisions, and then that is what the story becomes. And that has been, I think, my criticism of a lot of the books that I've read recently, is that it seems like the character interactions in the scenes are so much like lower priority than the prose and the style and the commentary. And I just think that's so backwards. I think that you should really be using the characters and their interactions to show those themes. There's something more ethereal and skillful at the same time about being able to evoke a scene that the only interpretation required is just reading the subtext, reading the characters' actions and the looks on their faces, and these big actions that they have toward each other. I think is it seems more off the grid. Instead of doing like my favorite books of the year, I am just gonna say The Age of Innocence was the book this year that completely destroyed me. And there are things you can interpret about that book, and I'm actually making a more produced video about The Age of Innocence, but I think that, yet again, this is part of this trend in my interests right now, that the most interesting part of this book is the character relationships and the subtext that Edith Wharton writes into these scenes. Just the characters of what they think of the other person, what they think of themselves versus what's really going on, and all of these interesting plays on societal expectation versus desire is just very inspiring and fascinating to me right now. And it feels more magic and kind of hard to put your finger on how she could have created this. I actually just watched the movie 8½, and I get a similar feeling from this too. And so it actually feels like a perfect movie to watch on the last day of 2021, as I am trying to make all of these different changes and change up the way that I've been approaching my creative process and creative focus. I took that film to be about someone who was very in their head, very ego-driven, and as a director, he wants to control everyone and like cast the people in his life appropriately. I think this is like a pretty loud intention in the film. And then as 8½, goes on, it seems that this is not a viable option for this main character anymore, and his attempts to control and to have everyone play their parts in the way that he wants them to falls flat on its face, and he ultimately has to stop making this big film that he's been working on, which is super cool because this shows such interesting growth for this character that he's just willing to abandon this part of himself that wants to orchestrate everything and wants to have everything make sense. And that's exactly what I want to do in the art that I'm making right now. And so I think it was just very serendipitous that I randomly turned that on today, because I think it's just a lot scarier. And they even kind of talk about this in the movie, that like audiences aren't going to understand this film that this character is working on because it's just very like impressionistic and doesn't really spoon feed it to you. And so I think that to really get your intentions across as an artist or a creative, sometimes you want to play it safe and be like, just in case you didn't get what I was going for, I'm going to spell it out for you. Because in my first book, for example, I made it just super trippy and weird, and a lot of people were like, I don't know what the fuck that was. And I kind of agree. My skills just weren't there yet. And so I think that, yeah, you kind of want to play it safe sometimes, and then that's not always the answer. Sometimes you just like have to be artsy-fartsy, I guess. So I guess that leads me to the last thing, is that I put my book out this year. I had worked on that for 4 years, and now that it's done, there is kind of a slump, a kind of like, well, what do I do now? But I am very proud of the way that it turned out. It's the biggest creative project I've ever put out in my entire life, and I do feel very good about it. It definitely feels like a massive step forward from my first book, and the feedback that I've gotten on it has been really cool too. I've gotten into some really cool conversations with people about what they've taken from it and what they think is going on with Lionel, which is super cool, because a lot of times it's just not what I intended at all, but then I start to look at it differently. If you would like to buy a copy, I'll put the link in the bio. If you need a discount, let me know. I'm not trying to get rich off of you, although God knows I need the money living in New York. But beyond that, I am just going to kind of continue on everything that I've been talking about here. So my New Year's resolution is actually really to do less. I want to do less music. I want to focus less on books and really put all of my focus into making videos. And so I'll still be doing a lot of commentary on storytelling. I'll be talking about movies. I'll still be talking about books and whatnot. But I think that if I ever feel confused, my mantra is just going to be video, focus on video. So this has been Off the Wall Novels. I don't know if that title still applies anymore. Pringle, do you have anything to say? Pringle is sitting with his butt perched above his water bowl, which is a poor strategy if you ask me, but that's just his way. Thank you everyone, Happy New Year. I'm Daniel Backer, goodbye.